thought I was helping my family stay afloat. Turns out I was just their personal ATM. When my uncle sent me a hidden video of my parents and brother mocking me behind my back, calling me a worthless burden, something inside me snapped. They had no idea who truly owned their home, but they were about to find out. I stared at the video again, unable to look away. My mother's voice, once the source of comfort, now felt like a slap across the face. "Lindsay only helps because she owes us," she said, with a bitterness that cut deeper than I ever expected. My brother Thomas laughed like it was the funniest thing he had ever heard, adding, "She acts like she's doing us some huge favor. What a joke." And my father, the man who used to help me with my schoolwork and encourage me when no one else would, simply nodded. He did not say a word, but his silence spoke volumes. I had watched the clip 3 times already, but this 4th time brought something different. Not just hurt. Clarity. Cold, sharp, undeniable clarity. I had been paying their mortgage for years. Through my limited liability company, Divine Investments, I had taken over the house when they were close to foreclosure. They thought they were paying a faceless bank, unaware that the monthly payments they submitted were barely a quarter of the actual cost. I had been quietly covering the rest. Every single month. For 4 years. The idea had come from my financial advisor, Kate. She had suggested I create the company to manage the transaction cleanly. That way I could help them while maintaining legal protection. They would never know the truth, and I would not have to deal with the emotional manipulation that always followed money talks in our family. At the time it seemed like the best solution. I wanted to help. They were my parents and Thomas was my brother, no matter how selfish he could be. But now, hearing their voices twist my generosity into some kind of obligation, I realized I had been wrong. They believed I owed them something. That my career, my savings, my success somehow belonged to them. My mother had always hated that I worked in tech, brushing it off as a phase. They wanted me to take over my father's failing real estate business. When I didn't, they started calling me selfish. Now they were reaping the benefits of the choices they mocked, all while painting me as the problem. But what they did not know was this. I had options. Divine Investments had a clause. A very specific clause. If they missed just one payment, I had the right to take full ownership. No discussion. No warning. And I was finally ready to use it. Dinner that Sunday was a performance, staged carefully around my mother's lasagna, and a table set with false warmth. I arrived right on time, smiling politely as I stepped into the house I had been silently paying for, unnoticed and unappreciated. The house still smelled like home, but something about it felt different now, almost hollow. "Lindsay, sweetheart," my mother greeted me with open arms, her gold bracelet catching the light. I noticed it immediately, new, expensive, and bought with money that should have gone toward the mortgage. Thomas sat at the table already, wearing his usual smug expression and business casual clothing that was a little too crisp for a Sunday dinner. "Good of you to make time for your family," he said with a smirk. I gave him a calm smile. "I always make time for family," I replied smoothly, though my stomach tightened at the word. My father entered last, holding a stack of papers he was pretending to casually review. I caught a glimpse bank documents. Of course they had prepared their pitch. This was more than dinner. This was a setup. "Before we eat," my mother said as she served herself a generous portion, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." My father nodded. "The mortgage has become a bit of a burden, especially with the business struggling. We thought, given your success, maybe you could help a little more each month." His voice held that same quiet authority he used when I was a teenager, as if he still believed I needed his approval. Thomas leaned forward. "Just an extra 2,000. You know, something small. I mean, you are doing fine, right?" I swallowed a bite of lasagna, letting the silence hang. They truly had no idea that I was already covering most of the mortgage. They had no clue that I was Divine Investments, their supposed lender. The irony was so thick it nearly made me laugh. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Uncertain times, right?" I added, letting the implication settle. Thomas scoffed. "Some of us are working hard to keep this family afloat. You just sit behind a screen." I gave him a cool smile. "Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones holding everything together." As dinner wrapped up, I excused myself to the bathroom, but made sure to pause outside my father's study. Their voices carried low and bitter. They were plotting again. Unaware I could hear every word. They had no idea that their next missed payment would change everything. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I slowed my pace and stopped just outside the half-open study door. Their voices were low but clear enough. The clinking of forks and glasses from dinner had faded, replaced by something far more chilling. "She's not going to help," Thomas muttered. "Did you see the way she sat there acting like some kind of queen with her tech money, while we scrambled to keep the business alive?" "Just be patient," my father said. "We have another option. I found something last time she was here. Her files sync to the cloud when she used our Wi-Fi. There's a company name in there. Divine Investments. She's been hiding money from us." My blood turned cold. I had been careless, connecting to their network during a previous visit. My cloud storage must have auto-synced and given them access. I had never thought twice about it. "She's been funneling money through it for years," my father continued. "It's a legitimate LLC and it's doing well. We can use this. She owes us that much." My mother chimed in next, her voice sweet like poison. "If she refuses to help, we remind her about the college money. That time she took money from the business account for tuition. She thinks we never noticed." I almost laughed out loud. That borrowed money had been with my father's approval when their check bounced. I had paid it back with interest. I had emails. I had receipts. "And if that doesn't work," Thomas added with a dark tone, "we reach out to her company. Ask some questions. Raise concerns about her mental health. Maybe suggest she's been misusing resources. That'll get their attention." That one hit like a slap. They weren't just ungrateful. They were dangerous. They were willing to destroy my career, the very thing that had allowed them to live comfortably. And for what? More control? More money? I slipped back toward the bathroom, turned on the faucet for effect, and flushed the toilet. When I returned to the table, their masks were back on. Smiles, wine refills, small talk about the weather. As I hugged my mother goodbye, she whispered in my ear, "Thank you for coming. I knew you'd understand." Oh, I understood perfectly. I smiled and whispered back, "You'll hear from me very soon." Inside my car, I sat for a moment, breathing deeply. Then I pulled out my phone and called Kate. "They're going to try to blackmail me," I said. "And I think it's time we move forward with the paperwork." Kate didn't hesitate. Her voice was calm but firm, the way it always got when she slipped into legal mode. "We'll move fast," she said. "I'll finalize the paperwork tonight and prepare the formal notices. They signed everything 4 years ago, remember? This will hold up." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. It was surreal, to be at this crossroads, one foot in a world I had outgrown, the other stepping into a future I would finally control. The next morning, the sun was barely up when my phone buzzed with the final documents. Kate had included a full legal breakdown, a timeline of events, and a copy of the signed purchase agreement. It was clear, airtight, and powerful. Later that day, my phone lit up again. This time it was Thomas. "Hey sis," he texted. "Heard some companies are laying off in tech. Must be tough right now. Just remember you've always got us to fall back on. Speaking of which, about the help we talked about." I stared at the screen, both stunned and oddly amused. He was trying to frame his manipulation as support. The irony made my fingers twitch with the desire to reply something sharp. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I called my Uncle Jason. "They went through my cloud files," I said. "Last time I used their Wi-Fi." He sighed. "I'm not surprised. They tried the same thing with your cousin 2 years ago. This is their pattern. Pressure, control, then guilt when that doesn't work. We're ready now," I told him. "The moment they miss the payment, Divine Investments moves in. They'll be month-to-month tenants, if I let them stay at all." Uncle Jason was quiet for a moment. "Do you need help when it happens?" "No," I said. "I've handled everything. But if they come knocking on your door, I want you to know the full story. Just in case they try to twist it." He cleared his throat, sounding almost proud. "Whatever you need, Lindsay. You're doing the right thing." That evening, I sat at my desk and opened my email drafts. I had one prepared for my company's HR department, just in case Thomas followed through with his threat. Attached were copies of text messages, voice memos, and even the video of their conversation around the kitchen table. Everything was time-stamped. Everything was undeniable. I saved the draft, ready to hit send if they ever tried to sabotage me. The mortgage payment was due in 2 days. They had no idea what was coming. The payment deadline arrived quietly. No alarms, no sirens, just a line on a calendar that marked the end of my silence. At 9 o'clock sharp, Divine Investments sent out the automated default notice. A clean professional message stating the facts. Payment missed, clause activated, purchase option exercised. The house was now under new ownership, mine. 12 minutes later my phone rang. It was my mother. "Lindsay," she said, her voice high and strained. "Something's wrong. The mortgage payment failed. The bank says we've defaulted. We need your help immediately." I took a breath, steady and slow. "Actually," I said, "Divine Investments isn't a bank. It's an LLC. My LLC, to be specific." The silence on the other end stretched long and thin. "What?" she finally whispered. "Check your email," I told her. "I've already sent everything you need to know." The default triggered the clause. "The house now legally belongs to Divine Investments. Effective today, your status is that of month-to-month tenants." There was shuffling, maybe her handing the phone to my father. "You ungrateful," my father's voice cut in, sharp and rising. "Careful," I said coolly. "Is that any way to talk to your landlord?" Another silence. "I suggest you read the lease terms carefully," I continued. "Your first rent payment is due in 30 days. If it's missed, an eviction notice will follow. That document is ready as well." I ended the call before they could speak again. Minutes later, the messages began pouring in. Aunts, cousins, even old family friends who had not spoken to me in years. All of them now suddenly concerned. "Family forgives," they said. "This is cruel. What would your mother think?" But I knew what she thought. I had the video. I had the group chats. I had 4 years of receipts. 3 months ago, I might have cried reading those messages. Now I pressed delete without blinking. Kate called to confirm the notice had been served. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm better than I've been in years," I replied. Later that night, I stood at my window, watching the lights flicker across the neighborhood. Somewhere across town, my parents were likely pacing their living room, trying to make sense of how everything had changed so fast. The truth was, it hadn't changed at all. It had simply been exposed. The morning after the default notice was served, I received a voicemail from Thomas. He did not even try to hide his rage. "You think this makes you powerful," he said, his voice low and cold. "But you're just proving what we've always said. You were never part of this family. You were just the outsider with a checkbook." I listened to the message twice, not out of surprise but because I wanted to remember how easily they turned cruel. It was almost like breathing to them, effortless. By that afternoon, the family's tone had shifted. My mother called again, this time with a different script. "Lindsay," she began, her voice trembling. "Your father hasn't been sleeping. This stress, it's killing him. We made mistakes, yes, but we're still your parents. Can't we just talk?" I kept my voice calm. "We're talking, Mom. We're talking through contracts now. Through rights and responsibilities, just like you taught me. You always said grown-ups handle their problems like adults. Well, this is me doing exactly that." That evening, I met with Kate again. The paperwork was moving swiftly. The house title was fully transferred. The eviction process had a timeline set. Should they miss even one rent payment? "You're being more generous than most," Kate said. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I replied. "I'm doing it for closure. For all the times I gave and they took. For the hours they spent planning to tear me down while smiling in my face. I just want it to end. But endings have a funny way of revealing more than you expect." Later that week, Uncle Jason sent me one last package. A flash drive. He had dug up some old files that my father had forgotten to lock away. Inside were emails years old that showed how long they had been manipulating me. Conversations about how much they could ask for without pushing me too far. Jokes about my naivety. Plans to claim mental instability if I ever fought back. I read them all, not with tears but with an eerie sense of detachment. There it was, proof of every instinct I had tried to ignore. They had never seen me as a daughter, only as a resource. I closed the laptop slowly. Then I stood, walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. Not to celebrate. Not yet. But to mark the turning of the page. The following Monday, I received an email from their attorney. It was brief, formal, and almost laughably detached from the chaos they had stirred. My clients wished to renegotiate the terms of their tenancy, it read. They believe the current arrangement does not reflect the spirit of the family dynamic and would like to explore alternative solutions. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then calmly forwarded it to Kate with a single note. Absolutely not. Their attempt to reframe everything as a simple misunderstanding, as if months of lies, secret recordings, and financial exploitation could be softened by vague legal jargon, was insulting. They still believed they were dealing with the old me, the daughter who said yes just to keep the peace, the sister who bent backward to support her brother's pride. Kate's reply came 10 minutes later. I'll handle it. By midweek, the energy shifted again. They had received the formal reply. No renegotiations. No extensions. Rent was due on the 1st of the month. Failure to pay would result in eviction, without exception. Thomas texted me that night. You've made your point. We get it. Can you stop now? Stop what? I replied. Following the law? He never answered. But I knew what he was really asking. Could I go back to being quiet, being useful, being blind? No. That woman was gone. That weekend I went back to the house, the one they used to call theirs and the one I now owned fully. It was quiet. My father was out. My mother and Thomas were home, but no one greeted me. They knew I wasn't there for small talk. I walked into the study and opened the safe. They had never changed the code. Inside were folders, tax returns, business statements, and the old deed to the house. I took it. Later at my place I framed it. Not to hang on the wall. Not to show off. But as a reminder. A symbol of what it costs to finally put yourself first. As I sat there, sipping coffee with the deed propped against the window, the thought settled quietly over me. They may never say thank you. They may never apologize. And that was fine. Because I wasn't waiting for closure from them anymore. I had already given it to myself. 2 weeks later, the rent deadline passed. Just as I knew it would. There was no payment. No apology. Just silence. Kate submitted the official eviction notice the next morning. It was swift, clinical, and entirely legal. The sheriff's office would serve the papers by Friday. That gave them 3 days to come to terms with what was about to happen. That same afternoon my mother called. I didn't answer. Then came a text. Please, can we talk? Not as landlord and tenant. As mother and daughter. It might have moved me once. Now it felt like another performance. A last-ditch attempt to crawl back behind the mask of family, hoping I'd forget everything they'd said and done. I didn't respond. By Thursday evening, Thomas left a voicemail. You win. We're leaving. His voice sounded hollow. Like a man who had finally run out of excuses to believe he was still in control. The next day, I stopped by the house one last time. The door was unlocked. Inside, boxes were half-packed, tension thick in the air. My father sat on the couch staring at the wall, a man who had lost more than property. My mother stood in the hallway holding a photo of the three of us from when I was 10, before the resentment, before the betrayal. She looked up at me but didn't say a word. That was fine. I didn't need her to. I walked past her into my old room, now empty. I stood in the quiet for a moment, then turned to leave. On the front porch, Uncle Jason waited with 2 cups of coffee. You okay? He asked, handing me one. I nodded. For the first time in years I meant it. They'll tell everyone you ruined them, he said. Let them, I replied. The people who matter already know the truth. He smiled. Proud of you, Lindsay. I didn't say anything back. Just took a sip and watched the moving van pull into the driveway. Justice doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it arrives slowly, quietly, like the final click of a lock turning in your favor. As I walked back to my car, I glanced at the house one more time. It was empty now, of things, of illusions, of lies. But for me it was full of something else entirely. Peace. 3 months later, I stood before the sold sign planted in the front yard. The house was no longer mine. Not on paper. Not in memory. I had donated a portion of the proceeds to a nonprofit that supports survivors of financial abuse. People like me, who spent years carrying others while being told they were selfish for doing too little. The rest? I invested in myself. My future. My freedom. Kate helped set up a fund under my name, one that would generate enough passive income to ensure I'd never have to answer another guilt-laced phone call again. I even took time off work, the first real break in years, to travel solo through Europe, something I'd always dreamed of but had felt too tethered to take. Somewhere between the cobblestone streets of Prague and the sun-drenched cafes of Barcelona, I realized something simple yet profound. I had mistaken proximity for love, an obligation for loyalty. But real family, the kind that lifts you without strings attached, isn't always written in blood. Sometimes it's found in the people who show up quietly, consistently, and without condition. Like Uncle Jason. Like Kate. Like the friends who stayed when things got hard. Looking back, I don't regret helping them. I regret believing I was only valuable if I did. Now I define my own worth. Not by how much I give to others, but by how fiercely I protect the peace I've earned. As I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, wind sweeping through the trees one last time, I whispered the words I wish someone had said to me years ago. You were never a burden. You were the blessing. And now you are finally free.